大家好，我也是东吴的校友，东吴会计系，然后后来东吴国际商学院跟 Thunderbird 双联这样子出去的校友，所以很开心有机会可以跟你们交流。我今天也找了一个东吴的同学 Boris， 等一下也会来跟你们分享一下，他也是这样子出来的。然后现在目前在 Thunderbird 上课，同时也在我们院长室工作，所以也许可以跟你们分享一下他自己的心路历程。然后 Danish 他是我们招生部的同仁，然后他就是特别今天来跟你们分享一下硕士啊、双联啊的一些相关的细节。那他的部分会英文的介绍，然后 Boris 这边会讲中文，然后 Q&A 的地方看大家方便，我们可以中英文切换。那 Danish 这边、我这边、Boris 这边都可以一起 cover Q&A。OK， 大概是这样。那 without further ado, Danish, please take it away. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Let me just share my screen and we can get started. All right. You can see my screen, thumbs up. Awesome, yes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Danish Habib. I am the Associate Director of Recruitment Outreach at Thunderbird. I'm here today to speak about the MGM program and what your pathway looks like coming from your home university to Phoenix, Arizona to start the MGM program. Before I go into the details, I want to give you an overview about Thunderbird, our vision and our mission. So the vision of Thunderbird is a world shaped by global leaders who transform complexity into clarity, elevate technology with purpose, and drive responsible innovation across borders and sectors. And the mission of the school is to educate visionary leaders who innovate with a global digital mindset to shape future organizations for enduring impact. So Thunderbird, the whole idea of our school and our education is we're going beyond what a traditional business education has to offer. So what this means is we're looking at training leaders and attracting leaders to excel in not only the private sector, but also government, nonprofit, and also in their local or in their international communities. And our unique approach merges technology with global thinking, empowering leaders to create future industries and ecosystems. A little bit of history about the school. Thunderbird was actually started in 1946, and it was started by a general after World War II who had this idea of creating a school where individuals from all over the world and individuals in the United States can get together and learn best business practices and then choose to start businesses in the US, maybe in their home country, or maybe in a third country. So in the 40s, this was really a unique concept at the time where there were all these international students, there were all these American students who were getting prepared to have this global career. So all this to say, if you come to Thunderbird, this idea of a global mindset, global education, or training individuals to have that global career is not something new to Thunderbird. It's something that's been like ingrained in the history and the DNA of the school. So Thunderbird today looks a lot different than it did in 1946. One of the biggest changes is now we are part of Arizona State University, and Arizona State University is one of the biggest public schools in the US, one of the biggest public schools in the world. So it has a very strong American brand. And I think that works really well with Thunderbird's brand, which is very strong globally. So for those students who maybe are coming from Arizona or Phoenix and want to have more of that global career, they can really tap into that Thunderbird side. And I think this works out really well for international students or international staff and faculty who maybe want to build more of a US or an Arizona network. You have all of those Arizona State University resources as a student to really leverage and take advantage of. So now this is how our relationship works together with the school. So we are a college at Arizona State University, and what we do is really focus on training students and leaders to have a global education and global management and leadership skills. So at the very bottom, you can see how two really important rankings come together, which is that domestic and that global. So Thunderbird is #1 in the world for international trade. That's a ranking that the school has had 6 years in a row. And then you combine that with #1 in the US for innovation. That's an Arizona State ranking, and that's the perfect combination of that global and that domestic brand that I was talking about. Again, another aspect of Thunderbird is really training leaders to think future forward and future ready. What this basically means is right now we know that AI is very popular. It's becoming ingrained in really every industry. A lot of different roles are trying to figure out how to really leverage AI in their day-to-day job. And that's a really big aspect at Thunderbird, where you may not get into the very technical side of it. There are opportunities to do that, but the main idea of the program is, as a manager, how are you going to be able to leverage those technologies with your teams? So again, you may not be using it on a one-to-one basis, but you may understand the value of this technology, and you're going to get that learning from the education that you have at the school. And it's really about how can you leverage that as a business leader to really make those business improvements in your role. So again, just speaking more about how the school has more than just a business education. Our students, when they graduate, they don't just go into those public or private sector, those private sector roles. We have students who graduate and they go into work for the State Department, or they might work for non-profit organizations, or they might have an entrepreneurship idea, but it's a social entrepreneurship idea. So all that to say is that we're not just training one type of student, like a typical MBA student that focuses on like finance or accounting. We're really training individuals to be leaders in whatever industry they want to go into to make really a difference. And speaking about the school and how it was formed in 1946, this idea of Thunderbird being global is not just something that's new to the school. We have students in 100 plus countries, alumni in 140 nations. So all that to say, if you come back, if you end up leaving after you're done at Thunderbird and you gain a little bit of US work experience and you're interested in going back to Taiwan, or maybe you created a connection to Mexico or to Brazil or somewhere in Europe, you can really continue to leverage that network while you're a student and after you graduate. And we have opportunities and resources for students to make sure that they can stay engaged with alumni. These rankings are really specific to Thunderbird. The number one in the world for international trade is something I've already mentioned. In the middle is our ranking in the US for executive education. So we have a department at the school that's focused on just engaging companies. And the idea is to provide them shorter courses. So this could be a certificate program over a week. It could be a custom program that we create for them. But all that to say is that we have those full-time graduate degree programs, but we also have an executive education department, and that really helps us really figure out what technologies they're using and what they're thinking about and what their business needs are. On the far right, we have our ranking for global reach and case writing. So one other thing that's very popular in graduate business schools is you read a lot of cases. So you will read a case and then you'll have to analyze it and come up with some sort of solution to whatever the problem in the case is. If that's something you really enjoy, maybe you want to come up with a case about your industry and you're going to come up with a solution for it. And then when you have a job interview, you can speak about the fact that you completed your education at Thunderbird, you have a master's of global management degree, this is what you learned. But in addition to that, you wrote a case that was very specific to your job or to your industry. So if that's something you're interested in, we have a case series club that students can join. They usually will host big conferences and opportunities for speakers to come in, but there's also opportunities for you to work one-on-one with a professor and write a case if that's something you're interested in. So hopefully you're getting an idea of how global Thunderbird is and how worldwide the network of the school is. And I think our alumni gives you a really good example of that. So on the far left, the president of Iceland, she is a Thunderbird graduate. So you can see she's somebody who didn't go into that traditional business role, but to the right of her, we have the CEO and chairman of Johnson & Johnson, the CEO of Pepsi, Warner Brothers, and British Petroleum. So again, this gives you an example of when you graduate from a Thunderbird degree, it really is whatever you are interested in. You can go into that typical MBA consulting roles. You can go into product manager roles, which are very popular for MBA students. But a lot of the times our students are coming from a background in maybe science or maybe legal studies, law, whatever other area, and they're interested in how can I combine that with a business background. So at the very bottom, you see how global our alumni is, 45,000 alumni. 23% live outside of the US, and I think that number is getting higher and higher. There's students from 143 countries we've had and 170 chapters around the world. So I'll speak a little bit more about that, but the chapters are an opportunity for you to stay engaged with the school long after you graduate. Our regional network, so we have physical and virtual locations, and then we also have campuses in other areas of the US. So on the far left, our physical locations are US, Switzerland, UAE, Korea, and Indonesia. And then in the middle are virtual locations. And then on the far right, we have physical locations where we offer degree programs. That's in Los Angeles and in Washington, DC. Those programs are more executive level programs, so there's not an opportunity for you to study there in the MGM program, but there's opportunities for you to engage with those centers and all of these centers here, if that's something that you're interested in. This is a picture of downtown Phoenix. So this is where you're going to be having the majority of your courses. I think this is a great picture of Phoenix. When you're at the school downtown, you can literally drive like 30 minutes, 40 minutes in any direction, and you can find a mountain. So if you're into hiking and outdoor activities, Phoenix is definitely a great place that you'll enjoy. So I spoke a little bit more about, I spoke previously in the alumni slide about how our students are able to like combine their background with a traditional business education. And I think this slide gives you a really good idea. So in a traditional MBA program, you will learn general business principles. It's primarily going to be training you to have a regional job or a domestic job. You're going to be focused on foundational business skills. So they'll want to teach you like accounting, finance, marketing, HR, strategy. That's the reason why a lot of companies like MBAs, because they have a general understanding in all of these areas, and they're really training you to go and be a manager or like a middle manager. So you combine, so how does that traditional MBA look with Thunderbird's global management and leadership business education? So Thunderbird is all about learning those practical business skills and leadership, but there's going to be a global context in all of your courses. So you might, in your undergrad, take a course, International Business 1 and International Business 2, and that course is going to have everything that you need to know about international business. But at Thunderbird, one, we're teaching you finance and accounting and marketing and strategy and HR, all the things I mentioned that a business student learns. We're always teaching and encouraging our students, like, how do you look at that in a global context? So yes, these are general accounting practices in the US, but you might be a student who ends up working in Europe or in Southeast Asia or in somewhere in Latin America, and those regions have different accounting practices. And we start to like introduce those concepts to students early on, so that if they are interested in those roles, they can start thinking about, okay, this is how you do accounting in the US, but if I want to go to a different country, this is how it's going to look. Same thing with marketing. Marketing in a regional or domestic job, you're mostly going after that audience that lives there. At Thunderbird, you might learn how to do an expansion from one country to another. That's a different audience you're going to be engaging in. So what are the things that motivate them versus your traditional audience that you were engaging with before? In addition to that, there's a strong emphasis on international relation skills. So my example that I just gave before, that was all about like learning the accounting and learning the marketing, but we also want to make sure that we train individuals to really develop those international relations. So that is another reason why I think so many US companies like hiring Thunderbird students, because they know that if we hire the student and we want to send them to one country and then send them to another country, most likely the countries we're sending them to, they were in a class at Thunderbird where they met students from those cultures. So they understand different negotiation styles, different communication styles. So in addition to those business skills, there's a very strong emphasis on having those international relations. So because of that, a lot of our students are looking for those international roles where they're going to develop cultural intelligence and global strategy. And all that really leads to having roles in those multinational organizations like PepsiCo or British Petroleum, working for NGOs and global agencies that allow students to really move from country to country or from region to region. So what type of students are we looking for? If any of these things really speak to you, even if it's one bullet point or two bullet point, but these are the kind of students that really come to Thunderbird and excel at Thunderbird. So students always ask about like things like our acceptance rate. I would focus less on that, and I would focus more on the type of student you're going to be in a classroom with. So one thing that's really unique to our school is a second language requirement. in my time working in graduate management education, I don't think there's any school I've seen in North America, at least, that has a second language requirement, which I think is really unique, which is how we're training students to really access that global marketplace. Another thing is a multicultural upbringing. A lot of the times our students may be born in one country, and because of their parents' careers, they might have went to boarding school in a second country, then their undergrad in a third country, and now they're comfortable with coming to US for their graduate education. And when they come to Thunderbird, they meet a lot of these students that they can relate to be like, oh, you were born in one country, but you had this really interesting multicultural and global experience. If you don't have that background, you don't speak a second language, you don't have a multicultural upbringing, we also want to attract students who want to develop that. So it's not like we want the most polished students who already have this background. If you're interested in developing that, a lot of times our US students don't speak a second language. They have not really traveled outside of the US. So we really get a lot of those US students who are like, I've always wanted to go and work in Indonesia. How can I make that happen? There'll be students from Indonesia who can really give them that insight. And then as we get to the program side, I'll show you how there's actually opportunities to go and do a consulting project there. Also, a desire to network and grow with other globally minded individuals. They want to travel or work abroad, develop their diplomatic skills, global consulting skills, or just enhance their personal brand. So again, not all of these things have to apply to you. If you want to develop that global business acumen, or maybe just one bullet point applies to you, I think you're going to find other like-minded students at the school, and that's what's really going to make your student experience. As you can see, we have students represented from many different countries. So again, if you're looking at, you may already speak a second language. Maybe you want to develop a third language. Maybe it's Spanish. In Arizona, Spanish is a pretty easy language to learn. You can speak with students at the school. You can leave Thunderbird and develop that language, but you can also learn other languages that you may have an interest in. Usually there's a student at Thunderbird who's also interested in that language, and you can learn together, or they may be fluent in that language, and you can really have that interesting language exchange. Some Thunderbird traditions that we have at the school. So on the far right, top left, you'll see regional night. Regional night, basically, every semester, our student government will pick a certain region of the world. So this could be Southeast Asia, this could be East Asia, it could be Europe, it can be North America. And then what happens is there's a big celebration. There'll be kind of other opportunities for students who may not be from North America or from East Asia to learn about that region. And that rotates every single semester. So I think that's a great way for you to kind of learn about your classmates and learn a little bit more about their culture, their music, their food, and where they're coming from. The flag parade is something where we have students who, if they're interested, can carry their nation's flag. And usually we have an opportunity during the orientation. So before you start at Thunderbird, the first week, there's an opportunity for you to carry your flag and then share something about your country. And then we have that at graduation. And that's usually the students' favorite part of graduation, because they're done their MGM degree, they're very proud of their journey, their families are there, and mostly a lot of students are always inviting people to come and visit their countries, which I think is a great way to kind of end your time at Thunderbird. Foundations on the top right, that's your orientation. So if you're nervous about how am I going to find my classes, which classes am I going to take, how do I figure out, if I need to go and see a doctor or a nurse at Thunderbird, orientation before your classes start, we will prepare you and share all those resources. You'll also get to meet all your classmates before school starts. Bottom left is homecoming. So this is a very US specific thing, where usually in the fall, we'll invite our alumni back to campus, and there'll be opportunities for our current students to engage with them. And I think the cool thing is we technically have two homecomings. There's a Thunderbird homecoming that you can take part in, and then there's an ASU homecoming. And the ASU homecoming, I think, is very interesting because like for me, myself, I'm not American, I'm Canadian. So I remember watching a lot of like American TV shows and movies and seeing homecoming, and there's usually like a really big football game and there's a celebration that happens. You as a Thunderbird student can go to that ASU homecoming as well. And I really enjoyed that as a Canadian, to be like, oh, wow, this is a very cool US experience. So as a student at Thunderbird, I would say take advantage and go to those ASU homecoming and other opportunities. The pitch competition, that is basically pretty straightforward. You will form teams of like 4 to 6 students. it's a competition. They give you like a business case to solve. You go in front of like a panel of judges, you present your solution. Usually the team that comes up with the best idea or the best solution will get a scholarship. This is basically what consultants end up doing. If you really enjoy pitch competition, writing cases, this is a great way to like kind of develop that before you actually go into your career. And when you go into the job interview, you can speak about the fact that, you know, you finished first place or second place at a pitch competition. This was the solution you came up with. And then you can also speak about case writing. Bottom right is First Tuesday. So the first Tuesday of every month, we have chapters in the US and all over the world. And basically the chapter leaders will try to organize a very informal gathering where alumni, students who are thinking of applying, maybe students who are doing like maybe students on a break who happen to be in that country, they can all go to this event First Tuesday and just meet anyone who's kind of associated with Thunderbird and grow your network that way. So that is a great way for you, even if you're come to the US, graduate, and then you are back in Taiwan, or maybe you're in a third country and you're like, I still want to meet other Thunderbird people. First Tuesday is a great way for you to kind of go in and make those connections. The Career Management Center. So this is something that's not offered at every school, but in addition to having your advisors who help you pick your courses, you have a career advisor, and this person helps you with one-on-one career coaching. So if you need help updating your resume, you need help updating your cover letter, maybe you have a Zoom interview coming up and you're really nervous, you're not really sure how to do a Zoom interview or an in-person interview, you can book time with your career coach and they will support you through your career journey. So the students who take advantage of this, who are going to classes, who are meeting with their academic advisor, and then also meeting with their career advisors, I think those are the students who are more successful because they're able to share things like, these are the internships I'm applying for, and then the career advisor can give them really good advice on this is the approach you should take. This is something that I really recommend. In addition to providing that support, there's opportunities to network with alumni. We invite them back to campus, and also we share career fairs with you. So if you want to go and just speak to employers at larger events, the Career Management Center can share those opportunities. After you graduate from Thunderbird, this is the type of skills that we want students to have. So global mindset at the top, that's one of the biggest skills that our students develop. But in addition to that, we want our students to be analytic thinkers, develop those tech, engineering, maintenance skills, think about how the work they do can reach across borders, having an interdisciplinary approach. So not just looking at business, thinking about how you can combine business with your background in science or arts or humanities, being a lifelong learner. So we have opportunities for you to continue your education with Thunderbird. So we have graduate degrees, we have certificates, we have doctorate programs, but all that to say, the student who graduates from Thunderbird really develops that curiosity, and even if they're not learning at Thunderbird, they hopefully have developed that lifelong learner skill set. And then these other ones like being creative, adaptable, taking initiative, but these are really the skill sets that we want students to graduate when they're done their time at the school. So now getting specifically into the program and how it's going to look for you. So the intake, typically for your students will be spring. So that is a January intake. The total time at Thunderbird is going to be around 16 months. So that's an accelerated plus 1 year. And it's going to be 3 semesters. It's going to have that transdisciplinary approach. You're going to complete 49 credits in the school, but with those 49 credits, 12 are going to be shared between your master's program and our MGM program. So that's going to reduce the time and only make it that plus 1 year. It's going to be fully in person in downtown Phoenix, but then there's also an opportunity for you to go abroad with your consulting project. I'll speak about that in a few slides. And the second language required by graduation, which for a lot of students like yourself, you probably already speak multiple languages, so that's less of a worry. These are the concentrations that we offer within the program. So like I said, most MBA programs will focus on finance or accounting or marketing. At Thunderbird, these are the concentrations that we have. So the most popular one students go into is global business. Global business, you can think of it as like an international business degree, which is why it's so popular. That's what we're known for. So a lot of students will kind of default into that. Also, it's STEM designated. So STEM designated in the US gives international students extra opportunities to work in the US. So it basically gives you a longer period that you can stay and work here with an employer. That's another reason why a lot of international students will end up doing global business because it has a STEM background, but that is not the only STEM designated concentration. We also have global digital transformation, and that is basically what I was speaking about earlier, how to leverage AI and all these future technologies, also a STEM designated degree. And then we have data science at the very bottom. Data science is very popular for students that are coming from a science or a math background. And I think that is a very popular and a very strong concentration to combine with like a management or a business degree. So those three are the STEM designated ones. They tend to be the most popular. But then after that, you can see we have legal studies, healthcare delivery, public administration, nonprofit leadership and management, global healthcare, sustainability, sustainability, development, and innovation, or you can end up designing your own. So this is the in addition to the type of student that we want, this is what I really want students to understand, that whatever your background is, you can come to Thunderbird and combine your previous background, whether it was work experience or your undergrad or whatever your interest is, with that business degree. So it's very interesting. We have students who graduate and they make their MGM degree very much like international business MBA, and they're the ones who go into those global consulting roles. But then we have individuals who are like, want to go into nonprofit leadership and management, which is very opposite of consulting. But all those organizations, even if it's a nonprofit organization, wants to hire somebody who understands finance and marketing and strategy. So that's how that somebody can provide a lot of value to a nonprofit organization. So that's basically an idea to show you that our students go into very different careers and industries. This is how the 1+1 pathway is going to look for you as a student. So before you come to Phoenix, you're going to already complete 12 credit hours. And how you're going to complete those 12 credit hours, it is going to be shared between your school and Thunderbird. So when you're completing your master's degree, we have credits that we recognize, and 12 credit hours are going to go into the MGM program. So that's going to bring the 49 down to 37. Then when you start your first semester in spring, in January, you're going to complete 15 credit hours. That's 3 MGM courses and 2 elective courses. So each course is typically 3 credit hours. So 3 courses times 3 credit hours are 9 credit hours, and your remaining 6 credit hours will come from these 2 elective courses. So you're going to take 5 courses in your first semester. Then you're going to have that Global Challenge Lab. So this is an international consulting project. You get it's basically 2 courses, but you get 6 credit for it. It's a project where you work in teams, and you either go to a domestic location in the US or you go to an international location. I'll have more information about that in the coming slides. And then your final semester, you're going to complete 1 MGM course, 4 elective courses, and something called PLD, which is Personal Leadership and Development. This is a course that you take that is related to the Career Management Center and your career coach. So this is what it's typically going to look like. You will have 12 credit hours that are shared from your degree into the Thunderbird MGM program. So you'll already be completed 4 classes or 12 credit hours. And then when you come to Thunderbird, you're going to have spring, where you complete 5 courses. You'll have the summer, you'll do a consulting project, and then you'll complete your remaining 6 courses in your final semester. This slide, the point of this slide is to show you how your concentrations work. So when I had that slide where I was showing you global business or data science or global digital transformation, when you take those elective courses, those are all offered through graduate programs at ASU. So you're going to be with other graduate students at that ASU college, taking those courses together. So it's a very high level course. If you're doing something in global business like supply chain, you're going to be with WP Carey students, which is the School of Business at ASU. If you're going to be doing global legal studies, you're going to be taking that with law school students. Same thing with communication courses or arts courses or public service courses. So whenever you complete your elective courses, it's a really cool opportunity for, again, to grow that ASU network, because you'll have your Thunderbird core elective Thunderbird core courses, and then your elective courses could be completed at a completely different college at Arizona State, and that could be sustainability or the law school. If you end up doing global affairs, global entrepreneurship, or global digital transformation, all those courses are specifically at Thunderbird. So those are the only concentrations where your whole experience will be at Thunderbird. But if you want to kind of have an experience where you're going to different ASU colleges or campuses, you can see that you'll be with those other graduate level students. Global Challenge Lab. So this is what you're going to complete in the summer. So this is a 6-credit consulting course for all master's students in the MGM program. And this is a great way to really combine what you learned in your previous master's degree in your first semester at Thunderbird with an actual practical project. So in teams of 4 to 6, you work full-time with a client during a 7-week module. You're not left on your own. You're usually mentored by a Thunderbird faculty. And the whole idea is you meet with the client on Zoom beforehand, you figure out what the statement of work is, what the deliverables are, what the expectations are, and then you'll spend 3 weeks physically at the client site. So you'll be a consulting team, you'll go in every day, you'll have maybe customers or employees that you interview depending on whatever the deliverable is, and then you'll come back to Phoenix and you'll present your finding. And students with kind of like the top projects or top findings, they get to present that in front of the school. And for a lot of students who may not have professional work experience or international experience, this is an opportunity for you to talk about both things together. I think this is a great way to stand out. You can talk to an employer that you were a student from Taiwan, then you went to the US, and then you did your global consulting project in Canada or in Chile or in Saudi Arabia. And I think that really shows the employer that, wow, the student is pretty young, but they were able to really develop their global mindset by doing a global challenge lab, by doing a 1+1 exchange. So this is a great way to kind of just keep building on that international experience that you're developing. These are the countries and the companies that our students work for. So you can see so many different countries all throughout the world. And something recently we started developing is more projects within the US. A lot of our students are speaking about the fact that they want more US work experience. And because of that, we're partnering with more US companies. But we do also have a big majority of students who want to really go abroad, and usually it really works out very well if the Global Challenge Lab happens to be in the country they want to work in. That's a great way for you to network with that employer. Maybe ask them that you may not be hiring, but I'm interested in this roles. What would you recommend for me to do if you've established that relationship? So the students who leverage this experience are really able to hit the ground running and have that global career pretty early in their career. So in terms of the admission requirements, we're going to make a pretty like a seamless process for you because we have a 1+1 partnership. But I just wanted to go over all of the kind of general requirements that all students have to go through. So the first thing is going to be an undergrad degree, because this is a master's program. To go into a master's program, you usually need an undergrad degree. Pretty straightforward. English proficiency. So there's 2 ways that you can meet the English proficiency requirement. If everything was taught in English at your university, then you don't need an English proficiency. Then all you need is to show us a medium instruction, and that will meet the English proficiency requirements. If everything was not taught in English at your school, no worries. We do accept TOEFL, IELTS, PTE, or Duolingo scores. Minimum GPA we're looking for is 3 is kind of like the minimum. Typically, students who apply to the program have a higher GPA requirement. They also may be a higher requirement for you to be a 1+1 student. So I'd make sure you speak with your advisor to make sure if you're eligible. But for Thunderbird, you have to have a minimum of 3. Everything is submitted through an online application. So ASU has an online graduate application. And on that, you can upload your resume. You have an essay that you upload. Also 1 reference. This can be a work reference or an academic reference. And then you upload all your transcripts. So your undergrad, your graduate, and any other schools you've attended. And then the highlighted part, admissions interview. So usually all of our students through the admissions process, they do an admissions interview with an alumni, and usually it's an alumni maybe from your home country or from your industry or has some sort of tie in what you're interested in, and they're really trying to figure out that Thunderbird fit. So this is where it's very important. I would say look into like why you want to come to Thunderbird. If the things about the second language, having a global career, developing a global business acumen, wanting to learn multiple languages, if that speaks to you, talk about that in your interview, even if you don't have a lot of work experience, and it will really demonstrate to the alumni that, okay, this student might be very early and young in their career, but they are a very good fit for Thunderbird. And if you're a good fit for Thunderbird, if they end up giving you a higher score, all of that can really influence the admissions decision. So I would say take that admissions interview very seriously. It could be your very first time you're meeting a Thunderbird alumni, and you want to kind of bring your best foot forward and really show them why you'd be a good candidate at the school. Finally, this is the last slide I wanted to show to you. This is just ways you can get in touch with us. The QR code, if you scan that, hold that up with your phone, it will take you to the Masters of Global Management webpage. We'll have more information about concentrations, Global Challenge Lab, the faculty that you can learn from, and also have all of this contact information. So you can take a quick picture, or you can scan this, and I'll share all this information after our meeting today.
Thank you, Danish. Thank you so much. Boris, the floor is yours.
Hi. 好，各位，我是那个今年春季到雷鸟双联学会的学生，我叫钟博勋。那先稍微介绍一下我自己，我在东吴大学待了将近10年的时间，因为我在东吴取得了4个学位的，就是2个硕士跟2个学士的学位，分别是法律、会计、国贸跟企管。那我是因为企管的关系，透过双联学会来雷鸟的。那你先讲一下，我觉得雷鸟这边的特色，就像是哈碧刚刚讲的一样，就是我觉得雷鸟这个地方是一个非常，你会在这边遇到非常多的不同国家的人。那学校的老师非常鼓励大家可以把所有人的智慧跟结晶结合在一起，然后去做到就是截长补短的效果，然后产出一个非常好的报告。那我个人认为，在雷鸟有非常多的机会，就是当然跟台湾非常不一样，因为雷鸟这个地方有很多的机会是你们要就是身为一个学生要自己去挖掘的，就是比如说像社团啊，比如说像课程啊，比如说像是工作的机会，这些东西都是在雷鸟会给你资源，但是资源在哪里，你可能要自己就是不断的去跟就是像 Danish 问，或者是 Helen 问，或者是跟其他的这些朋友交流之后才会知道的。那再来的话，是我个人在这边已经半年的时间了，我想要跟大家讲的是。双联是一个真的很好的机会，因为你可以用相对于外面申请一间国外学校比较低的成本，然后拿到2间学校的可能奖学金，然后减轻一下你自己的成本压力，然后到一个就是你想要逐梦的地方。如果你对于美国是有梦的话，那各位都知道，就是亚利桑那现在目前是一个非常蓬勃发展的地方，它因为TSMC 的关系，那有非常多的台商，非常多的机会都在这边慢慢的茁壮，所以如果你们有机会可以来的话，是非常好的。那另外站在一个学生的立场，我知道身为台湾人，我们一定要去考英文能力的测验。那跟你们讲一个我个人觉得比较算是不错的好消息是 ，ASU 跟 Thunderbird 他们不只会同意 GRE 或者是托福跟雅思这些成绩，他还可以承认多邻国。就是如果你对于这些英文就是准备上面会有一些压力的话，那多邻国会是一个还不错的方案。那目前的话，我好像现在目前就是你们这个学系跟的双联学位好像还在就是 pending 当中。那因为企管系已经有了，所以假设你们想要马上来的话，那其实就是商学院那边你们也可以去试试看申请。但是为什么系上的双联这么重要？还有另外一个原因是因为只要有双联，你们就可以把学分去做一个抵免。那学分抵免这件事情非常重要，是因为它除了你可以在这边免除掉一些比较难的科目之外，就是用中文学完，用比较简单的英文学完比较难的科目，然后在这边就可以不用上之外，还有另外一个好处是因为这边大部分的学费它是根据学分来做计算的，所以如果你在这边要多修1个学分，你就要多缴一笔钱。所以如果你可以先把学分抵掉，对你们来说会是一个很好的就是机会。所以我个人很倾向于用双联。再来推一下东吴大学，就是东吴大学的双联学位，就是相较于其他的学校，还有另外一个优势是，你基本上来说只要你自己努力，你就有很高的几率会上，因为你不用跟其他的同学去做竞争，如果像是我知道的台大、政大那些学校，他们都很优秀，他们也都有双联学位，可是他们在校内的时候就要经过1轮选拔。可是东吴大学基本上来说，我自己是没有经历过，所以就是东吴大学会是一个很好你想要来国外念书的一个很重要的跳板，而且东吴大学非常支持你这么做。然后对，那这就是我在这边目前的分享。那如果是关于课程的部分，在这个地方比较特别的事情是，就像 Danish 刚刚说的，这边的所有的专业都是透过你的选修课程来去决定你最后的专业，所以 不是你进来的时候就决定，不是你进来的那个当下你就知道你毕业的时候你拿的是哪一个学位的哪一个你拿的是哪一个专业，而是你在你自己整个选修的过程中会根据你选修的学分来去决定的。那这个地方有一个很重要的是，你们可以去查一下 Thunderbird 的网站。Thunderbird 的网站目前有16个专业，这16个专业里面有3个是 STEM。这3个 STEM 的专业就是，如果你未来有想要待在美国继续工作的计划，那 STEM 的话是可以确保你在毕业之后1年，因为所有的外国人基本上来说，他一毕业都会拿到一个东西，都可以申请一个东西叫 OPT， 可是 OPT 只有1年的时间，这个1年时间就是你在这1年你有可以工作的机会，你可以去外面找工作的机会。可是这个 OPT 只有1年，所以大部分的美国人，大部分的美国公司是不会hire你的，因为如果你只有1年在这边的话，对他们来说就是他们要一直不断的换人，他们的成本会很高。但是有 STEM 的话，就是 STEAM 这个计划的话，它可以在1年的上面再加个2年，所以就等于是你最多可以在美国至少待3年。那这样子的话，你就可以比别人还要再更有机会拿到这样子的优势。那蛮有趣的地方是，我觉得雷鸟是一个很厉害的学校。为什么？因为雷鸟商学院呢，它是一个商学院。照理来说 ，STEM 这样子的一个 certificate， 它只有这些工程啊、电机啊，或者是医学的那种学院会拿得到。可是雷鸟商学院有3个专业是有这样子的 STEM 的，所以以一个商学院来说，这是一个非常非常厉害的成就。这个得要给我们自己的学校打个鼓掌。就是除了它的排名还不错之外，然后再加上它给了学生非常非常多的资源跟机会。那还有另外一个有趣的地方，是因为雷鸟商学院是一个非常非常国际化的商学院，所以你在这个地方不是只有遇到各国的人，你会遇到很多跨年龄层的学生。所以你可以在这边交流到非常非常多不同的人跟不同的事物跟不同的行业。我个人觉得这是在台湾基本上来说，在你自己的专业打滚的时候，你可能不会遇到的事情。你可能一个不小心在一个会议上可以遇到一群 CEO， 然后跟这些 CEO 打好关系之后呢，你就可以得到一些你个人觉得还不错的好处。以一个学生来说呢，我个人的经历是，我在一个 Helen 推荐我去的会议上，莫名其妙认识了一个保险公司的老板。这个保险公司的老板就推荐，就让我们免费去看了一场 NBA， 然后是进 VIP 室。这个是一个，就是你在台湾基本上你完全想象不到的事情。这就是我个人觉得美国梦存在的最主要原因。所以就是如果你真的想要出国，然后美国也是一个你其实没有那么讨厌的地方，那我个人觉得 Thunderbird 是一个还不错的学校。然后它也是一个你可以进到美国一个我个人觉得算是一个很不错、一个很快速的桥。亚利桑那真的非常非常热，早上9点，夏天的早上9点10点是摄氏41度，就是你不会想要出门的那种。就是你不会想要出门，然后一整天会开冷气的那一种，对，然后大概就是这样。那如果还有任何问题想要问我的话，就是欢迎，等一下在就是问问题的环节都可以问，就是申请的流程啊或者是什么的话。那最后一个我想要补的，最后一个我想要补的就是，因为 Thunderbird 它其实是挂在 ASU 底下的，所以刚刚那个院长有提到说，就是院长有提到一个问题，就是看可不可以就是有一个独立的人来跟我们做联系。雷鸟的部分基本上来说都会有一个。就是 advisor， 就是这个学术的 advisor 会跟你联系。这个 advisor 是他只要是锚定你这个学生，基本上来说你都是找他联系。但是在你申请的过程中 ，ASU 会派一个人来专门跟你对接。这个专门跟你对接，就是他所有的申请流程，他都会告诉你现在缺什么，你要做什么事情。所以就是 ASU 归 ASU， 雷鸟归雷鸟，但他们最后会莫名其妙的合在一起。所以就是2个基本上来说都会有一个独立的人来去跟你做接洽。只不过是不是 Danish， 就是看你们有没有幸运可以遇到他这样子。对，那大概就是这样。谢谢各位。
谢谢 Boris， 看大家有没有问题，有问题的可以举个手，然后我们可以开放来聊一下。
黑人，因为我等一下就先到另外一场去，我就先离开。
好，谢谢教授，谢谢。
就希望各位同学，如果你有任何问题，就是赶紧趁这个机会把它提出来，这样子。那后续就交给吕老师了。对，谢谢。
谢谢。看大家有没有问题。好，拜拜。不要害怕，讲中文也 OK。Boris 回答。就我们其实，在那个 ASU 旗下，其实也是蛮奇妙的。像我们今天早上，韩国瑜一行人访台第一站就是拜访 ASU， 所以今天早上我们也是接待他们。所以其实，在 ASU 里面也是东吴校友嘛，对啊。可是所以就是也是蛮多奇妙的机会，可以认识各种各样的人，这样对。还是因为 Danish 跟 Boris 讲的太好了，所以大家都没有问题。I think you guys did such a great job, so no questions maybe. 吕老师，你觉得我们怎么处理 ？How do you think should handle this?
我补充一下好了。待会就看同学这边有什么问题，我觉得可以再请教一下。就是他们有关申请的部分。然后我想刚刚那个Boris 这边有特别说了，其实我们学院跟雷鸟这边签署的，其实有一部分就是有 data science 那部分。那data science 其实就是 STEM 的其中一个 一个 part 哦，所以如果你们很有兴趣的话，我觉得可以考量一下，就是大概会有一点点不太一样哦，因为如果你去你就你的那个data science 的部分，其实你是必须要到他们的School of Computing 那边，还有一个是记得上一次有说是engineering 那边是不是就有2个不是单纯在Thunderbird 这一边而已哦，所以你会接触到的会比较技术层面的东西，那我觉得可以去看一下这些相关的内容哦。那第二个就是我想其实这个说明会非常非常重要，是它可以加速你后面在所有的准备的事项上面。我想因为不管是Helen 或者是Danish 或者是Boris 这边，其实他们非常非常有经验哦。那你们的疑虑其实他都会尽量想办法帮你们说明好，然后解决哦。因为我想第一个可能大家会比较需要特别去了解，就是学费跟奖学金的这个部分哦。那有没有一些什么样的方法可以协助你去拿到比较好的奖学金？好，那另外一个其实刚刚 Boris 也特别提到，有没有抵免？哈，如果你今天去走商学院的那一边，那商学院他们有定了一些抵免的规则，好，所以就等于你要修了商学院的那一些课，你就可以拿来做抵免。但是如果你是走巨资学院这一边的，那巨资学院这边我们有定了一些规则，所以等于你必须要修满修到那几门课，你就可以拿来做抵免。好，抵免很重要的，其实就是刚刚 Boris 讲的那个省掉的12学分的钱，应该还蛮可观的。所以我觉得大家有一些相关的内容提早做准备啦，因为我看起来如果顺利的话，我们申请的那个 program 应该是明年8月的那个 program。那明年8月那个 program， 你等于今年就得要开始去准备相关的内容哦。那有很多可能你必须要在今年年底需要去了解甚至完成的，因为今年问一下 Helen 哦，如果我们的那个合约还没签完的话，他们现在还是可以送申请，对不对？只要过了就是适用，对不对？
对，我的理解是这样。我那天跟院长沟通的时候，这是我的理解，没错，对。
因为他们现在的 first round 的申请应该是在今年的11月30号，他们有一个 first round， 然后 second round 是在明年的1月30。那 third round 会到3月30。所以大概会有几 round 不一样的申請所以大家可以稍微找一下对啊，同学这边
够快，那因为我想说 Danish 要请他说一下奖学金的事情，会有兴趣。Danish, you want to talk a few seconds about scholarships, like strategies to get higher scholarships, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, of course. So how we assess students for scholarships is GPA is one of the first ways we do that, but it's not really the only thing. I did mention we have that admissions interview. So a lot of times after the interview, the alumni will give the students a score. So even if you don't have a lot of international experience or work experience, if you can really speak about why you want to come to Thunderbird, how you would benefit, and how you would go on to contribute to the alumni network, I think that's one way for you to stand out. Also, you'll have the recruiter that you work with. So your communication with the recruiter is very important. When they email you and ask you for an update, if you're responsive, you're professional, they can really then recommend you for scholarships, because then, although there might be opportunities where our executive director will reach out to the recruiters to be like, which students are you hearing that are very engaged, that are very responsible, and then they can make that recommendation. So there's things like your GPA, which might already be outside of your hand. It's because you're done your undergrad degree, but we can look at your master's GPA. So your education can make a difference, the alumni interview, and then your interactions with your recruiter. So the other two things, the interview and the interactions, like your professionalism, you can control that while you're applying through the process. So I would really focus on those things and don't be too worried about your GPA. We have that 3 minimum. If you're at a 3.4, 3.5, and you're trying to take courses that you don't need to take to raise your GPA, I would not recommend that. I would focus more on your essay, your personal statement, and researching into Thunderbird. Spend time doing that, and that will come across, because you'll be very surprised. A lot of students don't prepare for the alumni interview, and it's pretty clear in the interview to be like, this student does not know anything about Thunderbird or the MGM degree, versus this student has really done their research, and I'm going to really recommend them. So I would say focus on all parts of the application.
Thank you. 教授，还有什么？
我再请教一下那个Boris 这边是已经毕业了，还是正在就学当中？
我正在就学。
OK， 那我就帮学生再问一个问题好了。我想可能他们会比较，以前我们在看那个大家去那边可能会有一些 像 TA 啊，或者是一些其他的工作来 support 他们的一些财务的部分。那我想知道这个在Thunderbird 这一边大概一般的学生大家会怎么进行这一块，好吧？谢谢。
基本上来说，工作的部分有分3块，它还蛮复杂的。3块的部分，一个是学校开的 intern， 就是跟实习差不多，然后就是我们一般认知的实习。那我现在目前在 Helen 下面工作，就是用挂 intern 的方式。那还有另外一个是 CPT 跟 OPT。那 OPT 的话，就是我刚刚说的，就是你毕业之后要去外面工作。那 CPT 的部分就是你在学的期间，你可以去外面工作。可是这个工作的话，就是你要自己去找。你找到 offer 之后，你要回来跟 Danish 他们的部门去说，然后说完之后要去跑学校的整个流程，然后确定你可以拿到 CPT 之后，你才可以开始工作。那这个 CPT 的话，它有一个最紧绷的要求，就是你至少必须要是 in person 的学生，在这间学校待至少2个学期。
OK，
所以双联学位的学生，如果是以春季入学来说的话，你双联学位你会经历3个学期，就是春季、夏季跟秋季，所以就是你最快开始可以去外面工作的时间是秋季。
OK，
可是不管是 CPT 或者是 intern， 你身为一个外籍学生 ，CPT 或者 intern， 你1个礼拜最多就是不能超过20个小时。
OK，
对，然后 CPT 的话，基本上来说，大家都会鼓励说，你一定要，因为你在提申请的时候，因为你要提出你为什么要去这间公司工作的理由，所以这个公司工作的理由必须要跟你的专业做挂钩，它不是所有工作它都会承认，就是你不能去麦当劳就是端盘子，然后跟他说我想要去外面工作，就是你可能要去找跟你的专业相关的东西，然后来跟学校说，我因为这样，所以我必须要在外面累积工作经验。
嗯，
对。
OK， 好，